Welcome to Rising Tide Startups, where we chat with startup founders just like you from all over the globe. Each episode, we bring you practical and actionable tips to help you escape the cubicle and begin your own startup journey. Make sure you take notes. Take it away, Kevin.
Here's a quick word from our sponsor, Podbrand Media.
As a business owner, new sales leads are essential. At Podbrand Media, we create a branded podcast for you to generate those leads by interviewing your best potential clients as subject matter experts. Not only creating great rapport, but also great content to share in your industry. Affordable and effective. Contact us today at podbrandmedia.com to learn more.
Right back from the ad spot, this is Kevin Pruitt with Rising Tide Startups, and my guest today is Michelle Coulson. Michelle, thanks for joining us on Rising Tide.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I actually stalked Michelle on LinkedIn so I could get her on to come on the show, but I just loved the stuff she was posting and the stories she was sharing on there, and just really the space that she's in. But I would much rather her tell you that than me. So Michelle, if you and I met at a networking event, how would you introduce yourself to me?
Good question. Firstly, thank you for stalking. It's my job to do that as a recruiter. That's what we tend to do.
Friendly stalking.
If I had to yeah, exactly. If I had to describe it in a few words, my background is in recruitment. I spent about 9 years as a recruiter, and there's a longer version of it. But basically, I came to the realization that instead of helping companies hire, I wanted to help people find a job, specifically remote jobs. So now, using my recruitment expertise and years of working remotely, I take people through a program in which to help them get a fully remote job, and not just any remote job, one that's actually fulfilling and pays well. It's not just a crappy job. Excuse the language.
No worries at all. So I think you told me offline that you're actually kind of from the northern part of England, right?
Yes, from Manchester, or near enough. I'm from a town called Bolton, which not everyone knows.
Yeah, actually, I'm a Premiership fan, so I know Bolton had a good team as well when we were there. But
back in the day,
that's right. So it's so good to have you on the show. And can you tell us a little bit about the business that you started?
Yeah, so the name of the business is Remote Rebellion. I came up with that name because I genuinely was getting angry at the time. So it was back in 2021 when we'd been working remotely. Most of the world had been working remotely for the past year and a half. And I could see this trend of companies actually forcing people back into the office. They're like, okay, you've just had your whole life change over the last 18 months. Now we're back to normal. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like people had moved to the coast, or they'd moved in with their families because they lost their jobs or whatever reason. People, like the world had changed, people's lives had changed, and then suddenly these companies like right back to 5 days in the office, or back to do this, and I was getting angry and angry at this happening, especially when people had got a job and it was fully remote, and then things were changed suddenly. So Remote Rebellion is set up to help people, not just to get them a job, but to actually give them the tools in which to get that. So that's anything from learning where to find remote jobs, seeing how to improve their LinkedIn profile so that recruiters reach out to them, sprucing up their CV, which a lot of people think that's the only thing they need to do, but that's just one part of it. Learning how to network effectively so that you can get your network working for you, and how to interview like really impressively, and what recruiters want to see to get ahead of the competition, because it is a really competitive market.
Right. I mean, I can certainly see your experience coming into play, for being able to lead people through that process, because you just say, hey, when I was a recruiter, this is what I was looking for. This is exactly what, would catch my eye and move you from the stack of 100 CVs to 10. And for our American audience, a CV is actually a resume. So we're cross-cultural here, but
exactly.
A bit. So you made the decision to start the company, but were you actually working remotely, like in the UK, or had you moved abroad at that time?
Good question. So I worked first of all in a recruitment agency, and then moved into in-house in a digital agency doing the recruitment purely for that company. And I soon realized about 6-8 months into the position that I was recruiting mostly software engineers, and about 60% of the people I was speaking to back in 2016, 2017 were asking whether there was any remote working. And I was speaking to my managers and saying, hey, we need to offer remote working. This is what people are asking for. And they said, no, we can't do that. Company culture, blah, 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 whatever reason they wanted to give. And we weren't paying particularly well. And then Brexit happened. So we suddenly didn't have the pool of talent from the rest of the EU anymore. So I said, we're going to have to make a change. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to hire these people and work on these projects. So after a lot of nagging, after a lot of pushing, a lot of campaigning, I managed the best I got was up to 4 days a week remote. So we had to go in on Fridays. And back in 2017, I think that was a pretty good place.
Not a bad deal. Not a bad,
yeah, it was not bad.
Settlement there. That's right.
But I got a taste of this and I loved it. I actually bought a motorhome, an RV, and traveled around in there. But I didn't like the restriction of having to go back that 1 day a week. And I still found it was hard to hire people because people wanted that full flexibility, not just a little bit. So obviously 2020 happened and life changed and everyone got a taste of working remotely. And I was super miserable, super unhappy in London, having that time, like a lot of people, where they actually sit and reflect and be like, I looked out at some building site and some train track in central London. I'm like, I'm really unhappy. What am I doing here? What does make me happy? And for me, that was being by the coast. So I moved to Cornwall in the southwest coast of the UK. And being by the sea, I was just, it's gorgeous there. Being by the sea, being by the beach, being in the water, I was so much happier. So I knew I wanted that. And I knew other people's lives had changed, that they wanted a taste of that, and that to be their norm rather than just to be 2 weeks of the year in their holiday. Right. So there's a longer version if you want the longer version, or if you want to ask some follow up on that one. So well, the longer version.
I think I had seen either like a blog post or something that you had written that, or maybe an interview that you had done that where you talked about you got so tired of the commute itself, and how much time was wasted. And, that really, like, there were so many factors that kind of, played into you wanting to, you had a little bit of wanderlust in your psyche anyway. But it's one thing to go from London or go from Manchester to London to Cornwall. It's a whole other thing to move to Bali. So walk us through that transition, because I know we got a lot of listeners that are going, I want to work hybrid. I want to work remote, but man, I could never move to the other side of the planet here,
Yeah.
So,
so many people think that. So many people think, oh, it's easy for you. You could have done that. I've got a mortgage. I've got this. I've got that. Like I could have a mortgage in London, and you just, you rent out the property, or you sell your stuff. You give it away. You do what you can, because I realized that whilst I was happy by the coast, the UK winter wasn't for me. I get full on like sad when I'm not in the sunshine. And a friend had said to me that they moved to Bali because it was their happy place. And I had this full on like movie moment where I'm looking off into the distance going, happy place, where's my happy place?
Your 1 week in Ibiza just doesn't get it anymore.
Exactly. No, you need 2 weeks in Ibiza. So I decided to come here, and I figured, okay, I'm still working for the company, so they're gonna call us back to the office at any point. And this was back in, like, I think this was like March 2021. I was like, they're going to call us back anytime. So I'm going to make the most of this, like living from anywhere. And I'm going to go to Bali for 2 months. And then as soon as they call us back, I'll go back to London. So I did. I had an amazing time in Bali. I worked UK hours. So I think I worked like 12 till 8 p.m. Bali time. That worked perfectly fine. It worked fine. And that's the thing, like, I had my whole mornings to go surfing, to go to the gym, to hang out with friends, have coffees. And I was just so happy. My life was bliss. And I was still working full time and still getting a decent amount of work done. And then the night before my flight, so once the boss called and was like, okay, London's office is opening, you need to come back. I felt sick. I felt absolutely sick, but I thought, I'm in my 30s. This is just what you do when you grow up and get a real job, and you have to just get the tube every day. That's what you do. Right. Yeah, exactly. I've got a really adult. And then fate got in the way. And the night before my flight, I was having drinks with people at the guest house I was staying at. And my PCR results came back. The doctor texted me, as they do here. And I had COVID. I couldn't fly. And I was like, that's fate. So as my boss wouldn't let me work remotely, I'd asked him, I said, well, I quit. I'm staying here. I'll figure it out. And I didn't have any savings, didn't have anything to go to. I just knew that I didn't want to go back, and I felt sick of the thought of it. And I would do anything I could to stay in Bali.
What a great story. Let's put ourselves in the employer's position here just for a second. So let's say that I've got, my staff in London. They've moved. They've, like you said, moved in with the parents. They've made adjustments, but they're coming back in the office. And I have one outlier who's a great employee, but doesn't want to come back. So how do I handle that as an employer, with Michelle? I want Michelle to stay because she's a great recruiter. But if I tell her she doesn't have to come back in the office, then I'm going to tell everybody they have to come back in the office. So how do they balance that?
I would ask
Your
yourself,
answer is let them all work remotely.
let them all come back in. I'd first ask the question, what's your reason for wanting people to come back in the office? That's what I would ask employers.
Great question.
And my opinion is it's either fear or ego. Ego, because these bigwig bosses want to see that they've worked hard to get this nice office so they can look at them through their glass office in the corner of the room. I'm being a bit facetious here, but that's one of the reasons. The other one is fear. It's fear that they don't have control over the people, fear that they won't work harder, fear that they don't understand what's going on, or just the unknowing. So I think asking the question of why you need people in the office or want people in the office to start would be the best place.
That is what a great question. I mean, I have a day job that I go to, and I'm thinking, that it's a hybrid. So where half the time we're there, half the time we're working remotely. And I'm thinking, the times that we're there, there's often like an adjustment period in the morning, like people come in and they a lot of chatter. And it's like, it seems like that's a wasted time just getting settled into the job. Then it's like I wind down right before lunch, and then I have lunch, and then I wind back up to go to work, and then I'm winding down near the end of the day to think, and I'm thinking how much of that time, it's not just the commute, but it's like, is there also wasted time within the work day itself, that is distracting?
100%.
So I mean, there's so many things to consider.
100%, I agree. And I do see the standpoint that some people just do not work better remotely. And that's completely fine. I'm not for abolishing the office or saying there isn't a place for the office. Because some people need, some people need that. Like some people have terrible, naughty children at home that they want to get away from. And that's fine. They want to go to the office and like get a break from that. And some people genuinely just work better in the office. But I guess if you were looking to speak to your boss and say, what is the purpose? Like, what are you getting out of me being in the office those X amount of days a week? And this is how I feel I will be more productive. Wouldn't you want me to be more productive and happier? Like, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. And it is a shift, because I think, based on the Industrial Revolution, I mean, that's how we came up with this work day anyways, like almost factory work. And the idea that says, I'm actually paying you for for the time you're working versus for the output, I mean, like, I don't care how long you work. I mean, you've got a job, get your job done, do it well, do it with excellence. But, if it takes you 30 hours a week or 50, I mean, what's that principle that says, work expands to the time allotted? The whole idea that you gave me a 40-hour work week, so that's what I'm going to fill, with my
100%.
with my job. So that is really it's really a bit of a quandary. But I want to talk about like you starting Remote Rebellion. I mean, you saw a need, obviously. You saw people that, you almost scratched your own itch, that said, this is what I needed. This is what I needed to go through to work remotely. But what was the response of people when you first started talking to them? I mean, I'm sure it helped that you were in the recruiting space for 10 years. I mean, what a great selling point to start with. I mean, you're just not starting cold, so you have a track record here. But what was the response when you first started talking to people, and how in the world do you price a service like this?
Really difficult. And I've still been going through that journey. I think the response that I got then, and I guess I'm still getting now, is people are a bit confused by the model, because they've been so used to working with recruiters who get a commission. If they're external recruiters, they get a commission and work on behalf of the companies. So I think people are a little bit confused, like, well, what do you mean I pay you? Like, don't you get money from the companies? I'm like, no, I purposely want to have a completely impartial outlook at the companies I'm sending them and the recommendations I'm giving, because I don't want there to be something in it for me on that side. I want to only have their best interests at heart. So initially I started doing one-to-one coaching. So that was essentially just me and you on a call, walking you through certain LinkedIn profile, working through your CV or something like that. So I was charging on kind of like what my hourly base was. I was estimating, but now I wanted to help more people and do something at a lower price as well for the people that couldn't afford the one-to-one. And now I created a group program. So the group program is an online self-paced program that they can do. And all the things I was teaching on those calls is there for them, so that when we have those calls, have those sessions, we're not kind of wasting time on
Mm-hmm.
things that they could look at in their own time, and we really get to the nitty-gritty of specific questions.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I love the idea, and I am
Thank you.
curious. Do you think that, like, is it unique to recruiters? Are they a little entrepreneurial anyway? I mean, do you think there's a little entrepreneurial genetics in recruiters?
Yes and no. I think in most recruiters and most good recruiters, there's a big element of sales. You've got
Yeah,
to,
for sure.
if you're a good recruiter, you're listening to what the person wants, you're listening to their problem points, and you're matching them with an opportunity that matches that, if you're a good
Mm-hmm.
one.
Yeah.
So I think with entrepreneurial spirit, you kind of need to have some sales element in that as well. So
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily, but that they're very closely linked.
So you never came to any point. I mean, yours was just like dissatisfaction with the like working conditions and the requirements of the job. It wasn't that, you know what, I'm unemployable, so I've got to go work for myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And I think a lot of people that go and set up the business for themselves are not necessarily unemployable, but on paper they look unemployable. Like I've got so many people that I'm like, they went from ops to marketing to recruitment to this, and to someone who doesn't take the time or hasn't got the time to look and think, oh, they've got really important pieces that they can put together to one great role. Instead, they're like, does not fit this box, does not compute,
can't keep a job.
Yeah, exactly. Job hopper, like floater, like this, and it doesn't fit the rhetoric that makes it easy for them. And that's not necessarily their fault. It's just finding the time where they can consider someone like that can be quite difficult. So I think for me, I'd never, like, even now I find it a bit icky to call myself an entrepreneur, because I've always said I'm not business savvy, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm not, this is not me. And I told myself that story for so many times that only now in the last 6 months I'm like, okay, maybe I've got a team, I've got a business, maybe I am an entrepreneur now. Yeah.
Exactly. I woke up and I was one. That's right.
Yeah.
For so long, but I do think it's interesting. I mean, you're saying I struggle calling myself an entrepreneur or whatever, but I'm thinking actually, you are by definition, because you found a problem and you solved it. I mean, and you're making money by solving that problem. I mean, by definition, that's an entrepreneur. So
Okay.
it's kind of
we'll
hard
go
to
with that
hide from
then.
that.
Yeah.
So when exactly did you start Remote Rebellion? Like what month?
It
Year?
was in July 2021.
So walk us through that first day. You hung up the shingle. You're sitting at a workspace in Bali. You're going, now what?
Do you know, I almost think I blacked it out because it just seems like such a long time ago. I've forgotten how I actually started. I genuinely can't, like, it spiraled, and the first client I got was actually someone working at the company that I left, which was quite ironic. And I've since had a few people from that company that have joined up as well. So I guess it was me putting out some content on LinkedIn and saying, this is what I'm doing now, and the people that were following me on LinkedIn were like, that's interesting, can we have a chat? And because they knew me already, they were like, they had that trust in me, they knew I was a good recruiter, and I'd helped them hire for their teams as well, so they knew I knew my stuff. So I think that helps, and getting that one client, even if they were someone I knew, gave me the confidence to be like, I can do this. I'm giving them knowledge that they didn't know before. And it can be so easy if you're an expert in a field that you're like, oh, people just know this. Isn't that like common knowledge? Like, doesn't everyone know this? And then you realize when you speak to people, oh no, people don't know this. Like, and I'm teaching them something, and you get that confidence boost and the ego boost of like, I know my stuff. This people are getting some value from this. So, and then it spiraled from there. And I've never done any paid advertising. It's all just been organic, people coming to me because they like the story I tell, or my approach, which is a massive compliment to me.
Well, I mean, I am living proof that it's working. So, I mean, the content that you're generating on LinkedIn is it even sucks in podcast hosts. So, it's got a broad appeal. But I'm curious. So, are you helping people simply work remote jobs or find remote jobs, or are you actually targeting people that want to move away from their home country and almost be like this digital nomad, kind of / remote worker combination, that you're traveling, you're living away, living abroad, and you have a job? So what is that really your target audience?
No, Not really. I set out and thought that that's what it was going to be, and that I would help people to live the life that I've got, not necessarily just the life I've got, but if they want to go and move to Bali, they want
Right.
that. But I've since realized the more people I've spoken to, that is going back to my purpose. My purpose is, and the broader purpose is, to give people the opportunity to live a life where they're free, they've got freedom, they're happy, and they've got less regrets. If that means the less regrets are that they get to stay at home in the UK and spend more time with their family and never leave their home office because that's where they're happiest, then that's I've done my job, and that's the end purpose. Or if I've enabled someone or helped someone go and become a complete digital nomad and spend 2 months in a different city or different country every time, then that's also the same purpose. But to me, it doesn't matter if you want to stay in your house, if you want to go and travel the world. It's about having a job that gives you the freedom to do either of those if you want.
Right. Yeah. And it's interesting because I was on another interview recently that we were talking about the word pivot, that entrepreneurs use a lot. Like, you started out with an idea with a strategy in place, and, something wasn't working. So you kind of shifted, or the market shifted, or something happened. And I'm thinking, that we sometimes look at that as a negative word. I had to pivot. Well, actually, that's just adjusting to market condition. That's adjusting to what your market is telling you. And that's what you've done. You said, you know what? I thought it was something initially, but if I just listened to my audience, I learned something about them and adjusted. So
it's true.
Are you, like, when you're helping someone with the job side of things, and let's say that they are, living abroad, they're moving abroad to take a remote role, do you also help them adjust to that? Like, is there like that cross-cultural adjustment, that, learning to live in Bali versus Manchester, whole ship, because it's different. I mean, it is different living abroad. It's different.
It is
moving and shifting to a different culture. And it's not just, I'm working 5 hours later now, during the day. It is a complete shift of lifestyle. So do you kind of walk them through that as well?
No, not yet. My focus is on the remote job, and the lifestyle element like kind of comes later. We touch upon it a little bit on those adjustments, but the people that come to me have already made that decision that they want to get a remote job, and their reasoning behind it is varied. But I found about 90% of my clients actually are not from the country that they were born. Are not living in the country that they were born, so that they're already used to that kind of living somewhere different, which I found the most interesting, actually. So I had one client who was from Mauritius and had been working in London for the past however many 20 years, because that's where the work was. And he's like, I'm from an awesome country and I want to go back there, but there's no work there. So he wanted a way to go back to his roots. And I'm hearing that way more in the past 6 months. People want to go back to their roots. They want to go back to where they were born, where their family is, for whatever reason. And you talked about the word pivot before. I focus on helping people to get a remote job that is fulfilling and that pays well. And I'm even thinking about pivoting, because I listened to a podcast this morning that completely changed my mindset about does your job have to be so fulfilling? If your life is so fulfilling and this is just a means to an end and paying for that lifestyle, does it need to be that? So I'm questioning that even literally as of yesterday.
And it's interesting because it's a question I ask a lot to entrepreneurs. I said, does it matter if you're passionate about what you're doing or not? I mean, when they choose a business to go into. And half of them will say, absolutely, you have to have that, that, as the French would say, that raison d'être, that reason to get out of bed, But the other half would say, absolutely not. I'd sell T-shirts. I'll sell, food. We'll sell Amazon.
That's interesting.
Marketing. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. That's a means to an end. My job and my money is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. And
interesting.
So it's definitely a split crowd.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I mean, I definitely say what I do. It's a passion as well. It's a business, but I get angry sometimes when we're having these conversations about people going back to the office. So I'm really passionate about it, but I don't think you necessarily need to be, especially if you're working for someone else. You shouldn't be passionate. You shouldn't necessarily need to be passionate about someone else's passion.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I've never met a passionate accountant. I just haven't. I mean,
no.
So, I mean, they can love spreadsheets and they can love balancing books, but passion is a whole different level. But I am curious. So in your observation, what are some like if you're just sitting out there listening to this podcast, you're going, man, I've got to do something. So what are some industries that are really hot right now? What are some skill sets that are really marketable, from in the recruiting space for people?
It's a too broad a question if I'm honest. Like, and a lot of people do ask me that, like, what's a good remote job to get? What like skill sets? Focusing on your digital skills will be the first and foremost thing to do. So focusing on using tools like Loom and Teller and Slack and tools that remote first companies will be using will be a really good first port of call. Get used to using a Mac, a Windows, Zoom, and really understand all of these tools that you're likely to be using if working remote. When it comes to specific courses or skill sets, I would wait until you actually figure out what you want to do. People think like, what should I do? What should I do this?
Yep.
And one of the things that we do before we move into anything such as improving a resume or CV is really doing a deep dive, a deep analysis into what people want, what they like, what they enjoy, what they're good at, what their strengths are, and putting all that together to form a role. And I've had clients who had never worked from a laptop before. One client was a dance choreographer on cruise ships for 20 years. So she was in her 40s and like, what can I do? Who's going to hire me? I don't have any of these digital skills. And once we dug really deep and said, right, well, okay, what do you like? She was really good with people. She loved really getting to the bottom of problems. She loved like organizing. And she didn't even know certain roles existed, like a people ops role, for example. So, and she ended up doing that remotely. So, and people will hire you with no experience if you can find a way to articulate what your natural abilities and skills, even if you don't have the experience, how they can translate into that role.
That's a great word. It absolutely. And I mean, there's so many people out there that are like, I want to hire for character and I can train for skill.
Yeah,
that type
exactly.
of thing. So,
attitude.
yeah, it is interesting, the idea of, I guess we take things for granted, those of us who are like you and I that are on, we're on these software programs, every day. We work in these spaces. We work on Zoom, we work on Slack, we work on Teams, we work on all the, I can do Mac, I can do PC, but that's not everyone. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that have not had that type of exposure that makes it really good sense to kind of focus on soft skills. What else would you recommend people do?
Research into, if they're not doing a role, it depends. There's two types of people. There's people that are doing a role but not remotely. So they might be a product manager or a designer, and they're doing that in an office, but they want to be remote. So that kind of person is different to the person who's just like, my current job isn't possible remote, but I want to do a remote role. And I think actually researching the kinds of roles that you can do and figuring out what you want is a really good like first port of call. Because if you're doing a role already and you can just do that remote, that one's slightly easier. You can pivot that pretty easily.
Right. And it's an easy transition for a recruiter, and for a company that's looking to say, hey, you actually have the skills we're looking for, type thing. So, or close enough.
I think people really struggle with that. This is the one of the top things that people struggle with. One is actually finding remote job opportunities because the supply is declining slightly and the demand is going up. So there's a lot of competition for them. The second one is actually articulating their value to these employers. A lot of people, when they get to interviews, they're fine and they're comfortable with that, but actually getting it on paper in 2 pages, why, and the average recruiter spends 6 seconds scanning a CV. Scanning a resume. So if they don't capture that attention in 6 seconds, you're next. You're on to the next one. So that's the bit people really struggle with.
That is so true. I mean, there's got to be some differentiator. That's something that moves you from that stack of 100 to the stack of 8. That catches their eye. And it's like a video. I mean, if we're not interested in the first 5 seconds, we're probably going to turn it off. Type thing. So it's interesting. So if I don't know if you want to share this or not, that's completely up to you, but give me an idea for our audience, like what kind of range are we talking about cost wise to be in a group similar to what you've launched, that it's like on a monthly basis, and what's been your track record of of those that have joined this group?
So it's in terms of do you mean the numbers in terms of people going through it or the costs?
No, so first, like give me a ballpark range of what it would cost per month to be in a group like this. And then also like say, we've had a great tracker. We place 80% of the people that are in this program, they get jobs type thing. It might be still a little early for you to have those kind of metrics, but I mean, you probably have a pretty good idea of where you're headed anyway. So
Yes. Just to do a correction there on placing, we don't place anyone in jobs. Like, we're not recruiters.
Right.
We help people to get a job. We don't actually place them in it. And
Okay.
there's a certain amount of work that needs to be done on the job seekers. No, it's
Faux
fine. I
pas.
just wanted to make that clarification.
But they
It's fine.
successfully found jobs. We'll put it that way.
Yes, exactly. So it starts from 200 USD a month. So it's a 12-week program. And I keep it to 12 weeks because sometimes if you do that longer, people kind of duck out. They're like, oh, I'll get to that later. So the 12-week program is designed for people who are working full time as well. So if you're not working full time, you can get through that in theory in 2 weeks. But there's 12 weeks that give you enough time to be able to factor this in around your life as well.
And
so it starts from 200.
Self-directed, right? It's
the course itself.
Self-paced.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. But there's free elements so that you can either just do the self-paced course and have all the resources. So there's 750 remote first companies. There's 100 specialist job boards. There's a whole bunch of action guides, templates that you can send, and step-by-step videos with me actually screen sharing. So if you want to do the self-paced and just that without the calls, it's around about 200 a week, or you can do it in one lump, which is 500 for the 12-week program.
Okay.
And then if you want to add the community element to that, and you want to have, so Slack is a tool that we're using in which my team will add 2 to 5 remote jobs every week, handpicked for those particular individuals. So if you tell me, I want a project manager role that's remote from the US or work from anywhere, we'll send those in the group. And there's also a really great community element of that. So people are helping each other with resources, or they're encouraging each other, or like having a bit of a moan if they've had a bad day or a bad week. And it's and the calls go with that as well. So every single week for 12 weeks, there's a group call in which you can jump on. And I had one yesterday, and it was just so nice to hear. Like, I kind of stepped back a little bit, and people were just giving each other support and saying, you're doing great. We've seen a real increase in your confidence since this. And that really adds to it. And people get their questions answered in that. So that one is a one-off fee of 1,500 or 2 payments of 800. Yep. And then there's the one-to-one. So if you want more tailored one-to-one sessions with myself, and actually we go through things together, we apply for jobs together, we do mock interviews, we actually tailor your LinkedIn profile according to the industry you're looking for. Then that one is everything with the group, and then the one-to-one, and that one's 2,900.
Okay. All right. So what are you seeing like in a fairly short period of time? What kind of track record are you seeing? Are you seeing that like people are within the 12 weeks they're getting hired, or that they're just being prepped during that 12 weeks, and 3 months later they actually get hired? So what's kind of been the track record?
It's been varied. I purposely don't keep specific metrics. And the reason for that is the goal of the Remote Job Academy isn't just to get any remote job. It's to get a fulfilling job in an industry that you're really interested in, your values match. And a lot of people in the program are already in a role, so they want to wait for that perfect or ideal, should I say, not perfect role.
Great point.
So some people have got a first job that they applied to within 2 weeks. That happened to 2 of the people in the program. Some people took 3 weeks, some people took 4, some people took 6 months because they wanted to hold out for that right role. So I specifically don't keep the metrics because I find they're quite the vanity metrics, and I don't, and it wouldn't necessarily look good on paper if I said this person took 8 months to get a job, but they don't know the backstory, because this is an individual. This is not a number. This is a person who is working 40 hours, 50 hours a week. They've got kids, and they want to hold out for that right role. And then I've got some people who didn't get a remote job after the second session we had. He's like, I'm not going to continue with the program. I was like, is everything okay? He's like, well, after our first call, I realized I'm not doing what I want to do, and I want to retrain as a pilot. And I'm like, great, this is awesome. So that's right. That's the purpose of making sure someone's doing what they're happy. So that's the reason why I don't keep these stats.
So I want if you're listening to this on a podcast, I want you to get on YouTube and watch this episode. And it's probably about around 31, 32 minutes. Michelle goes full mama bear mode, on when she starts talking about her community. It was great. I mean, it was like,
I didn't even realize I did that.
She's like, these are my people. They are not
They're my
numbers.
babies.
That's right.
It's true.
I
Oh, I'm
love
glad
it.
that came across, because I do. I put so much, I'm probably too much sometimes, into every individual. I go above and beyond to make sure that they're getting what they want. And I want to make sure that they're going for what makes them happy.
Yeah, what I mean, it is 1,000% apparent, and yeah,
Good.
but I encourage you got to watch the YouTube. But man, we have we kind of talked about so many different things, but as we wrap up today here, is there anything you would just like to kind of close us out with that, has been a thought kind of rattle around in your mind as we've been chatting, and then remind people again where the best place to find you online.
Sure. I think that one of the last things I would say is, for anyone who is unhappy in their job and thinks that they can't ask for more because of the pandemic and because of the layoffs and because they feel like they're not worthy enough. If something is making you unhappy, do something about it. That might not be that you want a remote job. That might be you want more flexibility or flexible hour, whatever it is. Like, choose your happiness, and it's not just a selfish thing, because your happiness is going to affect the people you love around you as well. So it might sound a bit wishy-washy, but it makes a massive difference. So think of it as a selfless thing. Think of it as making your other people around you happy, right? If you don't feel like you want to make yourself happy, which you should. And people can find me at remoterebellion.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, Michelle Coulson or Remote Rebellion, and also on Instagram, Shell is Remote.
Follow her on LinkedIn, especially because I think that's the deeper content that you'll find there, and it really is. It's great stuff. It is.
Thank you.
In a sea of noise out there, it was something that attracted my eye. That said, she's really posting things that are interesting to read, and I can see that you're trying to add value. You're not trying to just sell something online. So, Michelle, thank you again for taking time today, and it's been a pleasure to meet you over Zoom, and thanks again for just playing your part and helping all boats rise in a rising tide. Michelle, have a great week.
Thank you.
We hope you heard some great takeaways. Make sure you follow up with our guests today and show them the support they deserve. As always, thank you for listening and playing your part in helping all boats rise in a rising tide.